growing up in Westchester, I got involved in the movement at the time to help Soviet Jews leave the USSR at a time when they weren't allowed to practice their religion. They were not allowed to emigrate. And there was a big international movement that grew up to support them, send them assistance, advocate on their behalf, and demand that they be allowed to leave if they wanted to. And as a child, I participated in marches and I mobilized a group at my high school. And for me, it was kind of inspiring to join together with other people, and we would march down to the UN, and there were just thousands of people who would gather together and be chanting and making our points, waving our signs. And I think for me, that sort of kindled some of my interest in the area of human rights and what it felt like to join together with other people to work on behalf of an important cause. So there's a couple of formative points of my upbringing. It goes back to those experiences visiting South Africa as a child. And I think I was kind of mystified. I mean, my parents would just sort of say, they had the double-decker buses, and as a little kid, I wanted to go on the upper deck, and they said, no, you can't go there because that's for black people. And and that was just how it was. You couldn't go to this beach. You couldn't use this water fountain. I mean, it was a really strict and sweeping system. And I knew there was a movement to try to overthrow apartheid. I knew there was a guy named Nelson Mandela who was in jail, but I didn't really know much. But it kind of nagged at me. And I was actually at a play of my senior year. A friend's mom got tickets to this play, and it was called You Strike the Woman, You Strike the Rock. And it was a play by three black South African women, and it was just sort of about their lives and depicting, they acted out all of these different scenes, all the work that they had to do, really arduous domestic work. And at the end of the play, there were people in the audience who just started, again, chanting these slogans. And it was like Free Mandela and Power to the People. And I kind of sat there, and I just remember on the train on the way back home, I thought, I'm going to go to South Africa.
Thank you for such a brilliant talk. I'm Alexandra. I was wondering if you think that trigger warnings are helpful, harmful, or ineffective.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is that they should not be mandated. It shouldn't be sort of an edict. You have to put a trigger warning on your syllabus. I think where the problem with trigger warnings is sort of the implication, there are a number of things. I mean, one is the implication that, people can't sort of tolerate being exposed to something that might be traumatic or that they might evoke an experience that they've had. And I sort of feel like, as you go through life, you are exposed to those things. You can't really be shielded from those things. And that probably the better approach is to try to cultivate resiliency, and certainly not to imply that if this might be triggering, that's a reason to miss the lesson or not show up to class that day. That said, I mean, I sort of think of this story at Harvard. I went to Harvard, and they, during freshman week, you go and see Love Story, the movie. And I remember just reading this girl from my class, like her mother had died recently, and she was like, I needed a trigger warning for Love Story because it was very upsetting to see that movie of someone dying in a similar way. And I thought, that's where, going back to how we approach the work, trying to understand, the kernel, I can empathize with that, it was upsetting to her. I don't think she really needed a trigger warning, but, I think a generalized sensitivity to your students and their backgrounds, not hiding the ball, not trying to do things just for shock value.
So I have a question. A very specific question about bureaucratic micromanagement when it comes to issues of free speech, especially because I, as a graduate instructor, am caught right in the middle of this. And I'm talking of, we all know what those measures are, DEI training, anti-bias training, so on and so forth. And I've been to numerous of these meetings, and I saw with my very own eyes, virtually 100% of graduate instructors at Yale absolutely loathe this sort of training, with every fiber of their being. Everyone was playing on their phones, no one was listening, everyone thought it was totally a waste of time, and the instructor would often end early because no one was listening. And yet, every year, there are multiple periods during the academic year where it's almost like endless mental torture for a couple of weeks. You have to go to last year I went to 16 meetings. I went to 16 meetings for all this stuff. So, I just kind of want to get your take, because you've been following what's going on in the United States, is if we're talking about free speech, what are the free speech implications for this sort of mandatory institutional anti-bias training, which has essentially become an industry in many institutions in the United States?
Well,